afternoon or good morning, depending where you're based, and welcome to our webinar Before the Strike, Preemptive Threat Detection of APTs with Silent Push. So first, we will start with a quick introduction. So at first, we as Aqaio, we are the distributor of Silent Push in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And if you have any questions afterwards, we are more than happy to help you with them. And today, I also have my colleague Noah Plotkin from Silent Push with us. He's a solutions engineer, and he will walk us through the presentation and the demo of the tool. And yeah, so maybe some small words from Aqaio's side. We are very happy to partner with Silent Push, and I think it's a very interesting solution, especially for threat hunters and also for CERT teams and similar. So it's a very great solution. I'm more than happy to show it to you today. So maybe we walk quickly through the agenda. So we start with the introduction. We talk about the Silent Push mission, preemptive threat intelligence, the indicator of future attacks, or could also small IOFAs. Then defending against APTs with IOFAs, and then we have at the end some examples and questions and answers. In case you have any questions, we would love to see them in the Q&A section. We will take care of them at the end of our webinar. So not much further to say. I would say I will hand over to Noah Plotkin, and he will show you talk at first a little bit about the solution, and will afterwards also show you the platform and its capabilities. And therefore, I would hand over to you, Noah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christoph, and it's great to be here with everyone. I think it's appropriate to start with an overview of Silent Push for anyone who might be unfamiliar. So Silent Push was founded about 4 years ago or so, when our founders recognized a significant gap in the threat intelligence landscape. While many organizations and teams really aim to proactively hunt for threats and track adversary infrastructure before it was weaponized, they often relied on multiple tools with disparate data sources, and these tools really lacked integration, often leading to inefficiencies and incomplete visibility really into the early stages of threat actor operations. So what we set out to do is to create a solution that streamlined this process, combining robust data collection with advanced analytics to provide actionable, preemptive threat intelligence. So we offer a platform that enables organizations to effectively identify, track, and disrupt threat actor infrastructure before it becomes operational or weaponized. That's really what our goal and our focus is. And a critical element of this approach is our focus on indicators of future attack, or IOFAs, as Christoph had mentioned. And really, unlike traditional threat intelligence that often relies on indicators of compromise, or IOCs, which inherently are artifacts of attacks that have already occurred, our methodology really centers on identifying infrastructure during its setup phase. This includes newly registered domains, DNS configurations, and hosting patterns that adversaries create long before launching their campaigns. And to achieve this, we leverage advanced data collection techniques like DNS resolution and web scanning. And these capabilities really allow us to then map out threat actor infrastructure in real time, providing a comprehensive view of their operations. For example, by resolving DNS records regularly, we can detect changes in uncovered domains or subdomains linked to APT or advanced persistent threats. And this data really forms the foundation for tracking the life cycle of malicious infrastructure from its creation to its eventual weaponization. So it's our unique ability to combine multiple data points into a cohesive threat landscape that allows security teams to identify patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed. And we can talk a little bit more here about this concept of preemptive cyber intelligence. Christoph, if we just move to the next slide here. Awesome. So what is preemptive cyber intelligence? I think it's important to kind of first define this, as this might be a net new term for some folks on the line. So preemptive cyber intelligence is really at the heart of our mission, as I'd outlined earlier, and it represents a shift from traditional reactive approaches to a proactive model of defense. We define preemptive cyber intelligence as the identification and analysis of adversary infrastructure before it is used in an attack. And this approach really focuses on recognizing the earliest indicators of malicious activity during the planning and setup stages of an adversary's operation. Now, why is this important? Because in today's threat landscape, waiting for an attack to occur or relying solely on indicators of compromise means you're always a step behind. By the time IOCs surface, the damage is often already done. Preemptive cyber intelligence really enables organizations to stay ahead of adversaries by targeting their infrastructure while it's still being built, long before it becomes operational or weaponized. And the value of this approach really lies in its ability to disrupt the attacker's chain of events. So by identifying infrastructure early, again, such as newly registered domains, suspicious DNS configurations, unique hosting patterns, we can detect threats in their infancy and then take action to neutralize them before they're weaponized, whether that be consuming those indicators in a feed and maybe pushing them out to the perimeter level to block off of, or to ingest into some existing security solution, maybe like a SIM, to do some network correlation against. Really the end goal being, how can we action and make this intelligence actionable? So really so we can kind of start to get into the indicators of future attacks here and really define again what that is, because similar to preemptive cyber intelligence, this might be a net new term. This is something that we've started to use and coin within the industry here. So indicators of future attack, or IOFAs, are really a cornerstone of our approach to preemptive cyber intelligence. And simply put, IOFAs are early indicators derived from adversary infrastructure that is being set up but has not yet been used in an attack or not yet been detected. So these indicators really provide security teams with the foresight needed to act before an adversary can weaponize their infrastructure. And what makes IOFAs so powerful is their ability to reveal malicious intent during the preparatory stages of an attack. So threat actors don't launch campaigns overnight, right? They need time to create and configure domains, to set up those DNS records, acquire those hosting resources, and then test their infrastructure. I'll provide just an example here. We can detect unusual patterns in domain registrations, hosting environments, or DNS configurations that signal the creation of infrastructure tied to malicious campaigns. And these indicators often appear weeks or months before any active attack occurs, giving organizations really a significant window to respond proactively. And unlike traditional threat intelligence, which often reacts to past attacks, IOFAs allow us to shift the focus to anticipation and prevention. So by identifying infrastructure in its earliest stages, IOFAs help disrupt the attack chain before it progresses, really reducing that risk of compromise. And in the next slide here, we'll dive a little bit deeper into how IOFAs differ from traditional indicators of compromise. So here, really, to fully understand the value of indicators of future attack, or again, those IOFAs, it's really helpful to compare them to indicators of compromise, or IOCs, which have traditionally been the foundation of threat intelligence. Now, IOCs are retrospective in nature. They consist of evidence that's left behind by an attack, such as malware signatures, malicious IP addresses, file hashes or URLs that the security teams use to investigate and respond after an incident has occurred. So IOCs are crucial for understanding how an attack unfolded and for strengthening defenses against similar threats in the future. But IOFAs, on the other hand, are forward-looking. Instead of focusing on post-attack evidence, IOFAs are designed to detect malicious intent during the planning and setup phases of an attack. They really provide early warning by identifying adversary infrastructure, whether again that be domains, DNS configurations, hosting setups, and other elements, long before they're actively used. And the difference here between IOCs and IOFAs is like the difference between investigating a crime scene and intercepting a plot before it happens. While IOCs are critical for the forensic analysis and remediation, IOFAs allow organizations to proactively disrupt threats, preventing incidents from occurring in the first place. And really, it's this shift from reactive to preemptive intelligence is what make these IOFAs really a game changer for an organization. By focusing on the early stages of an attack's life cycle, IOFAs provide organizations with that window to take preventative measures, again, whether that be by blocking malicious domains, strengthening their defenses off of those feeds, or alerting internal teams to potential risk. And we'll see and talk a little bit more about specifically how this translates to stopping APT groups here. So one of the key strengths of Silent Push really lies in our ability to combine advanced DNS resolution and specifically first-party sole-sourced DNS and historical DNS data with web scanning data to build a comprehensive view of adversary infrastructure. And this approach really is instrumental in tracking advanced persistent threat groups, or APT groups, whose operations often rely on complex involving networks of domains, subdomains, and IP addresses. So we'll start with the DNS resolution side of the house. What we do is we actively resolve DNS records multiple times a day, monitoring how domains and subdomains are configured, where they point, and when changes occur. And by continuously collecting this data, we can start to identify patterns and anomalies that are indicative of adversary behavior. For example, we may observe domains being pointed to a specific IP address or configured with DNS records that suggest preparation for malicious activities, such as a wildcard DNS setup, which we'll talk about here a little later in one of our case studies on a group that we've been tracking. But this differs from the more passive DNS, or historically what's been referred to as passive DNS data collection, in which maybe an organization goes and purchases data from a third party, such as a resolver, and then provides that data in the form of passive DNS. And instead, again, what we are doing is conducting more of an active collection process, where we collect as many IPs and domains from a variety of sources that we can, and then force the active resolution of those records at a minimum of once per day. Then this, paired with web scanning, which we get from running endpoint scans on all of those IPs and domains, is where we can start to analyze the content, configurations, HTTP headers of web infrastructure, so on and so forth. And really, by doing this, we can uncover unique attributes such as server configurations, SSL certificates, specific paths and behaviors that threat actors use. And all of these attributes, those just being a few examples, help us fingerprint infrastructure. And then that allows us to link seemingly unrelated domains or IP addresses back to that same group. And when we combine those two data streams together, again, that being that DNS resolution data set and that web scanning data set, we start to gain the ability to track APT infrastructure across its entire life cycle. So for instance, we can see when a domain is registered, how its DNS records evolve, and how its web content or server configuration changes over time. And it's these insights that allow us to detect not only active infrastructure, but also dormant or staged infrastructure that could be weaponized in the future. And that kind of comprehensive view is really critical for tracking all groups, but particularly APT groups, as that's the focus of the conversation today. And because those groups often rely on obfuscation, rapid changes to their infrastructure to evade detection. And so our approach really kind of cuts through all of that noise by focusing on the fingerprints and patterns that are unique to each group that we can track. And we'll see that here in a few case studies that we want to walk through. So I want to first start with a case study on Sapphire Sleet, or APT38, as some might be familiar. So who is Sapphire Sleet? Sapphire Sleet's really a sophisticated subgroup of the Lazarus Group, which is a North Korean state-sponsored APT that's really known for targeting cryptocurrency exchanges, venture capital firms, and organizations in blockchain and emerging technology sectors. But since 2020, this group has conducted really financial heists and cyber espionage, often leveraging advanced tactics to achieve those goals. And their campaigns often begin with spear phishing and social engineering. They'll, for example, create fake job postings and collaboration offers on platforms like LinkedIn and Telegram, impersonating employees of legitimate organizations. And once targets engage, members or operators from the group move the conversation from email to messaging apps, where they start to entice them to download malware or visit malicious websites designed to steal cryptocurrency or intellectual property linked to that organization. And what makes Sapphire Sleep particularly challenging sometimes to track is their strategic use of infrastructure. So, for example, they frequently register domains months or even years before using them in an attack, making them appear legitimate to automated detection systems. But they'll also employ a wildcard DNS record and wildcard SSL certificates, enabling any subdomain of a domain to resolve dynamically. And this infrastructure flexibility is what allows them to rapidly adapt and scale their operations while remaining under the radar. So at Silent Push, we've been actually able to uncover Sapphire Sleet's infrastructure by identifying patterns in their domain registrations, their hosting environments, and their DNS configurations. And using advanced techniques like SOA record analysis and IP pivoting, we've mapped out clusters of related domains that align with their known tactics. And this really allows us to identify their campaigns even before they launch active attacks. One standout feature here of their operations that I'll share is their reliance on subdomains customized for specific targets. So, for example, subdomains may include the names of the organizations or individuals they're impersonating, adding credibility to their phishing lures. But by analyzing these subdomains and associated DNS activity, we can actually detect their infrastructure setup phase and provide organizations with early warnings when we detect the creation of that type of infrastructure. So Sapphire Sleep really evolves its delivery methods. So in addition to email-based lures, they've also recently adopted fake virtual meeting invites, redirecting victims to the password-protected attacker-controlled sites as well. And this really kind of highlights, I think, their adaptability and focus on exploiting, the latest tools and platforms that are being used by their targets. And there is some degree of overlap here with kind of the next case study that we can take a look at. And that being Kimsuki, or APT 43, as some might be more familiar. So again, who is Kimsuki? Kimsuki is another North Korean APT group that's been active for over a decade and is well known for cyber espionage campaigns targeting government, research, private sector organizations, typically within the US and Western European or DACA region organizations. They're really a sophisticated adversary. They often employ, similar again to Sapphire Sleep, phishing campaigns, malware deployment, and lateral movement within networks to achieve their goals. And at Silent Push, what we've done is we've really focused on identifying their operational infrastructure early, using techniques that, again, allow us really to kind of stay one step ahead here. I'll just kind of preface or caveat, we can't necessarily disclose specific proprietary details for this particular group, but I can share some high-level insights into the TTPs that we leverage to uncover and track their activity. So one method involves DNS analysis, where we examine how domains are registered, hosted, and resolved. Kimsuki will often employ distinct patterns in their domain naming conventions and hosting environments. And by identifying these patterns and combining them with historical DNS records, we can start to map out all of that related infrastructure. Another key TTP that we can share is the header server fingerprinting. by analyzing unique server configurations used in their infrastructure, such as specific versions of, let's say, maybe Apache or PHP, we can create a fingerprint that links seemingly disparate domains together. And this technique helps us uncover new domains connected to their operations, even when they attempt to obscure their tracks. We also can leverage and have leveraged pivoting on IP addresses to uncover additional infrastructure. So, for example, when we identify a malicious domain, we investigate the IP address hosting it to find other domains that share the same hosting environment. And that often leads us to clusters of domains that belong to the same threat actor, which we've observed and seen in this case. And kind of the last TTP here that we can share is we employ behavior analysis of their domain usage. So focusing on how they configure name servers, SSL certificates, and even domain registration timelines. All of these details really, when viewed collectively, start to create a profile of their operational habits, enabling us to track their infrastructure as it evolves over time or as it starts to be stood up. And really, it's through those combined methods that we've been able to identify hundreds of domains linked to Kimsuky campaigns. While not all of those domains necessarily may be actively weaponized, detecting them during the setup phase is what allows us to provide that actionable intel to organizations so that they can start to mitigate these threats before they even have the opportunity to materialize. And I think this particular case study with Kimsuky highlights why preemptive intelligence is so critical. Advanced groups like these, Kimsuky and others, invest significant resources into avoiding detection. But by focusing on infrastructure and creation and management, we can start to uncover those campaigns before they get a chance to become weaponized. Awesome. So I'll pause there for a second. We're going to take a deep dive into a quick demo here of the platform to kind of walk through what it looks like in two different use cases around enriching network indicators, specifically a domain, and then doing some proactive threat hunting in our web scanner. But before diving in, just wanted to pause for a moment and see if there were any questions that were coming in via chat that we could help address.
So at the moment, it seems all to be good. So if you have any questions,
Excellent.
Please put them in the chat. We will take care of them.
Perfect. Then, Christoph, I will pull up the Silent Push platform, and I can go ahead and share my screen here.
Yeah, perfect.
And awesome. Christoph, just to confirm, you're able to see this all right?
Yeah, looks good.
Perfect. So we're in the Silent Push platform here. And again, the two use cases or examples that we want to walk through just by way of demo, and I'll caveat just by saying there's a whole lot in the platform, different use cases, of course, features, functionalities that we will not get a chance to go through today. But we'll definitely provide some next steps here before the webinar ends on how to go about scheduling a demo if you're interested in seeing more. But the two use cases that we want to focus on today are enriching a domain to learn more about it, essentially going about assessing its risk level based off of all of the different relevant data points we collect at Silent Push. And then also want to pivot then into the web scanner, where we can build an example query hunting for a common info stealer that we can go out and then start to unravel infrastructure that's being hosted, that is hosting that particular info stealer here. So we'll start out with the domain of interest. Sorry, let me just copy this over. Excellent. So we will take a domain. Let's say we're interested. We come across this rss-feed-monitoring.com domain, and we're interested in learning more about this domain. we can go ahead and enrich that domain. And what this will do is it will bring us to what we at Silent Push call total view, which really is creating a central viewpoint for all of the different data points, relevant data points we have pertaining to this particular domain. At the end of the day, what we want to do is make it as easy as possible for an analyst to either come into the platform or interact with this data via API, whether that be just the raw API or this data integrated with an existing technology or solution that is used by the organization, and make it as easy as possible for that analyst to make some determination on this risk level. Is this particular object risky or is it not? And we want to provide all of the relevant data to assist in making that decision and make it as easy as possible to pivot across. So every object in Silent Push will be assigned a risk score of 0 to 100. We could see in this case where that risk score is coming from. So we want to be as transparent as possible into that risk score. And in this case, we could see it's largely being driven by the fact that it is on one of the threat feeds, those IOFA threat feeds that we maintain or produce at Silent Push. Specifically, we could see this as part of our APT 28 domain threat feeds. So we could see it has those feed tags, but we also see that there's some risk here coming from the name server reputation, which we can jump into a little bit more here within the tabs below. We can get some metrics around our passive DNS, or what we refer to as passive aggressive DNS infrastructure. Again, because of the difference in that data collection process, it is more of an active resolution process as opposed to the traditional passive DNS process, but we can pivot across these different DNS record types. We can see how often that in the last 30 days, this domain has jumped to different IPs or ASNs from our infrastructure variance metrics, start to get some WHOIS information or some live scanning information from this particular domain. As a reminder, we will go out and do endpoint scanning on each IP and domain we collect as part of that DNS resolution process. So won't necessarily go through each of these in depth. What I will do is just talk a little bit high level, starting with the passive aggressive DNS collection. In this case, we could see since our collection, this domain has resolved to one IP address. Now, if we wanted to go out and learn more about that IP, certainly something we could do. We can go out and perform a reverse lookup, essentially go out and see all of the different domains that resolve to this IP. We can pull up just a quick IP preview, learn a little bit more about the infrastructure associated with this IP address and its risk score. So really making it as easy as possible to go out and pivot and interact with this object in the platform. We can go through and again, start to visualize how many different times this IP has changed to different domains or different, how many different times this domain has changed to different IPs or ASNs, really being able to visualize that fast flux technique we often see domain operators use. We can learn more about the particular name server changes. So again, going back to our risk score here, we saw that there was some reputation risk around the particular name server that this domain is using. So we can see how many different times that this domain has changed name servers, and then get some more information on that name server reputation, essentially looking at how many other domains are utilizing this name server. And of those, how many of those domains are listed on feeds or blacklists, and we'll then provide that reputation scoring around this particular domain. Around the name server that this particular domain is using. So we can really kind of start to get all of the different data, again, that is relevant for an analyst to start to make a decision about the risk score of this particular object. So for the sake of time, we'll pause there for a second and really pivot more so now into the web scanner and how we can start to leverage that endpoint scanning data to conduct proactive threat hunting. So the example that I want to walk through today is going out and hunting for an info stealer called Medusa Stealer. So to actually take a step back here, what we do when we run an endpoint scan is we collect about 150 different metadata attributes associated with that particular resource. Things ranging from the JavaScript files that are referenced on the page, favicon values that are being used, which is particularly powerful for looking at brand impersonation attempts. It's going to include some of that DNS or whois data that we saw, header server data, HTML body or content data, SSL certificate data. So really a whole host of different attributes that we can start to pivot off of and build searches around. And what we do in this web scanner is create individual field names for each of those metadata attributes. So we can start to go out and look for infrastructure that is similar or associated based off of those attributes. So in the example, again, that I want to use here, we're going to go out and hunt for Medusa Stealer. And what we can do is use that HTML field name, because by default, you're able to purchase Medusa Stealer from a couple different Telegram channels, some dark web forums. By default, when you purchased Medusa Stealer at one point from any of those forums, it had on port 80 Medusa Stealer in the HTML title here. So a simple search of the HTML title field name with the Medusa Stealer value reveals about 350 unique results where we can see different pieces of infrastructure, different times that we've scanned infrastructure that has Medusa Stealer in the HTML title. So what we could potentially do here is say, let's grab all of these IPs or all of the domains, and let's put them into a threat feed and push these out and block them. Maybe we want to go out and do some correlation work to see if any of our users have ever gone out and visited these sites, which could then trigger an investigation. But the other thing that maybe we can see in analyzing this is the most recent scan date is mid-October. It looks like there was a lot of activity. We were frequently scanning pieces of infrastructure that match our search criteria here, but it kind of dropped off around mid-October. Now, for some background, the reason being is there was some public research put out across the industry about the ability to hunt for Medusa Stealer using this HTML title. So operators started to pick up on that. And as any operator would, they start to change their tactics, their TTPs that they're using. They started to go in and remove Medusa Stealer from the HTML title. So from a threat hunting perspective, that presents us with the need to go out and find other similar attributes, overlapping characteristics or similarities between two different pieces of infrastructure that we can use to then go out and still hunt for this malicious infrastructure. So what we can do in Silent Push is we can take two different pieces of infrastructure, in this case, two different IPs that are both hosting Medusa Stealer, and we can actually compare them against each other. So we can say, let's look at all of the differences between those metadata attributes or the characteristics. But more importantly, let's take a look at all of the similarities here. And we can see that there are a number of different similar values that we can pivot off of here and really modify our search to see if we can go out and find similar infrastructure. First thing that stands out here is this header hash value, this HHV value, one of several proprietary, unique fingerprint hashes that we've developed at Silent Push. We can see that there's this body analysis, body SHA-256 hash that is the same. And then there's also this logo underscore URL that is the same. Both pieces of infrastructure here are referencing a very specific SVG file. So what we can do with that information is say, we'll expand our record. We'll quickly just add those values that we've seen to be similar to our query. And now what we'll do is we'll actually remove the HTML title value. So what we're doing instead now is searching across those three values that we saw that are similar or overlapping across those two different pieces of infrastructure, but removing HTML title, the HTML title value from our search. And what we can see is we get 417 net new results, where if we scroll through, most of them will not have that Medusa stealer in the HTML title. So this is all new infrastructure that we've identified. We can just quickly see from the HTML body SSD hash, it's going to be a fuzzy hash of the HTML content, that it all appears to be pretty similar. Whatever the content that's being hosted here is all pretty identical or pretty similar here. So again, the next step might be, let's take all of these IPs and add that to our threat feed that we had created with those first list of IPs, and again, push these out to block off of, to do correlation work. Maybe first we want to take a look and see, though, what is actually being hosted here? What does that content look like? Are we right in assuming that this is very likely Medusa stealer? And what we can do is run a live scan from our platform, as you saw there, or we could actually go out into the live scan feature. And what this does is it essentially allows you to point silent push infrastructure out to an endpoint or a resource and conduct an on-demand scan. So the web scanner, we're looking through all of the historical records from our scanning, but in this case, we can do an on-demand scan to say, let's look and see what all of these attributes look like live, and let's go out and grab a screenshot. So this essentially operates like a URL sandbox, a safe environment to go out and visit sites and view kind of the infrastructure attributes in a screenshot. So in this case, you can pull this up and say, aha, this is Medusa stealer that's being hosted here. So our search was correct. Those are 3 new values that we can use in going out and hunting for this particular piece of infrastructure. And maybe now, again, we want to go in and put all of those IPs into a threat feed and actually start to action that intelligence that we've just produced. Now, this was really just one example of hunting for a common info stealer that's available out there. But this really, I think, sheds light on how we go about starting to build fingerprints or find commonalities in different pieces of infrastructure so that we can leverage those to produce those indicators of future attack and really track specific threat actor groups, campaigns, malwares over time. Christoph, I don't have access to the chat here. Just wanted to check to see if there were any questions that might have come up, or use this as an opportunity to remind folks to drop any questions in the chat there before we check back over to the deck.
Yeah, there is actually already one, and it was asking, are you using the enterprise or the community edition?
Yes, great question. So I'm currently in the enterprise edition. The same workflow that I just went through, both in enriching a network indicator and leveraging the web scanner or live scan feature, are available in the community edition. The community edition will be certainly scaled down from the enterprise edition with limited numbers of queries that can be run, but this same sort of workflow could be replicated in the community. I happen to be working in the enterprise edition currently.
Okay, yeah. Besides that, no new questions.
Excellent. Christoph, I think we could maybe jump back over into that slide deck to finish off a couple of points.
Yeah, so as we just mentioned, the community edition, do you see my screen? Just as a quick question.
Yes.
Yeah, so the community edition, so I would highly recommend for everybody to test out the community edition, to test a little bit around, do some queries, just test a little bit around. You see below the link, I will also paste it in the chat just in a few seconds. And besides that, anything you want to add on the community edition, Noah?
No, I think that's you summed it up perfectly, Christoph.
And yeah, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat. We can answer them now. And I see that there is a new one. Can we use this app to execute our scenarios for purple and red teaming?
Yeah, so great question. Reading that in the chat now. So Yes, yes, and no, right? And I'll say a little bit more on that. So this is not going to necessarily be an adversary or an attack simulation or emulation tool where you could go in and type in specific commands to run and see how that translates into an attack. But what this you can start to do is obtain all of the data that you would necessarily need to assist in conducting those purple or red teaming exercises. In particular, going out and using some attack surface mapping data that we provide to go see what is publicly exposed, what is the underlying infrastructure being used to host different IPs or domains, and leveraging that data to assist in any sort of purple or red teaming exercises. Going out and seeing if there are any dangling DNS records associated with the Apex domain that you might be interested in targeting, or dangling DNS records referring to records that are pointing to services that have been deprovisioned or decommissioned, no longer exist, but that record still exists, and that presents an attacker the opportunity to perform subdomain takeover, from which all sorts of malicious activity can occur. So it's going out and identifying those types of vulnerabilities that then can be used to kind of empower or assist in the purple or red teaming exercises.
Okay, and the next one is, can we take all the endpoint metrics from Silent Push via API?
Yeah, another great question. Yes, absolutely. So everything I've showed in the platform today can be done via API. That's one of the best, I think, features of our data is that we have over 250 custom API endpoints, so everything can be pulled in via API and included into automated workflows or processes.
Okay, and the next one is, do you provide Intel reports on the APTs?
Yes, a good question. We do. So we really kind of covered the production aspect of what we provide, where we can leverage the raw data ourselves to start to produce intelligence. What we did not get into really is how the data, the finished intelligence that we provide at Silent Push, can be consumed in the form of those IOFA threat feeds or finished intelligence reports. And so what we do for almost all of the IOFA threat feeds that we produce is we write a TLP Amber report in conjunction with that, which really serves as our explanation for how the adversary manages their infrastructure and how we go about tracking it. So it really provides our homework or our research methodology for tracking that particular group or threat, so that we provide that full transparency behind essentially how we track it, and then how those feeds are populated with the indicators that we term indicators of future attack or attribute to those particular groups.
Okay, and the next one is, are you using feeds from other providers or in-house CTI data collection sources?
No, so everything that we use, all of the data that we collect is sole source, first party. So we are not purchasing any sort of third-party data from any other providers or other feeds from providers. All of the feeds that we make available in the platform, both those IOFA threat feeds and other threat feeds, are all in-house produced, along with all of the data that we collect and make available in the platform to use to produce those IOFAs, are all first-party, sole-sourced, all produced and collected by Silent Push.
Okay, perfect. So I don't see any more questions. There's another one arising just now. Thank you for your response. Is there any integration capability of the system like Jira, Caldera, etc.?
Yeah, so another good question. The first is one that I know we've been actively working on. So would probably have to take that back and see what the status is with an integration with something like Jira. But Burke, it might be worth having a separate offline conversation around that if you're interested in learning more.
Okay, perfect. I think that also sums up and brings us to the last point. So if you want to find out more about Silent Push, how Silent Push can help you with your threat intelligence, you can book a demo with us, and I will just paste it in the chat now so that you have it available. So there you have the link for booking a presentation or a demo with us. And below you can find the link to the community edition where you can test a little bit around and see what you can find with Silent Push. And yeah, just understand the tool even further. And yeah, I would say thank you very much for attending and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christoph. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Noah. Have a great day.